Welcome to the Consultants Way podcast, your go-to resource for all things professional services consulting. Brought to you by McMahon and Ransford, a strategy consulting firm with over 30 years of experience helping B2B organizations achieve sustainable growth. And the Consultants Way, the leading comprehensive consultant development program. Hosted by Dean McMahon and Anthony Paluska, we share expert insights, firsthand experiences, and conversations with industry leaders on the topics that interest you most.
The views and opinions expressed by guests on this podcast are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of their employer, company, or affiliated organizations.
Welcome back to the Consultants Way podcast. Anthony Paluska, Dean McMahon. Dean, how are you?
Doing great. Looking forward to, as you know, my weekend is going to be with three grandsons and their dads, all at I call it a camping trip. We actually have a camp, and I don't think I get credit for camping. But yeah, we'll be fishing and everything. So yeah, this is, it's a good day. And I got to tell you, I'm very excited that we have actually a person in early career, not day one, but early career, to talk about how AI is affecting, but also, and he stresses so well, what's still important about the job.
You were having some conversations with different people, and you said, hey, we have a representation of guests on the podcast that fit a couple of categories, but they're primarily later in their career, their leadership level, they're working on some of the strategic problems of how do I run my practice and how do I think about how some of these tools apply to my team. But getting somebody on that kind of lived through the journey a little bit. He's a senior consultant and I mean, still, 5-6 years into his career. And so not fresh out enough to have some real perspective, which comes out in the conversation. But I think it's a valuable listen to anybody at that level, anybody aspiring to get to his level, or anybody at the leadership level that is trying to understand, what's working well and what's not, and how that cohort of people on your team are thinking about all of this. And so I thought it was a great conversation.
Yeah, the other thing I think he does a really good job of, and he does it politely, which is, hey, this is going to make the way you do this, keeping the traditional skills, will make your career better and make your clients' outcomes better. And he doesn't say it, but I get the feeling he's differentiated in his cohort. But he didn't say that. But I just felt like he's really aggressive using the tools.
Yeah, and it does align. His attitude towards all of this aligns with a conversation you and I were having when it was just the two of us a couple weeks back, where we were talking about hey, this doesn't replace hard work, right? It just changes what you spend your time doing. And there are still ways, as he highlights, that as you're coming up through your career, you can differentiate yourself from your peers, not just in your usage of the tools that are available to you now, but actually how you take that, how do you learn from that, how do you apply that so that you can actually do more of driving the client outcomes rather than just getting the work product produced faster than you would have before. So no, it's a great conversation. Intend to do more like it, and get some other perspectives around the industry of some other people at different stages of their career. So looking forward to sharing Michael with everybody, and we'll get to that right now. Hey, Michael, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Anthony. Glad to be here.
Yeah, excited to have you. So, Michael, we'll have done a bit of an introduction for you and everything ahead of time, but if you don't mind, reintroduce yourself to the audience. Tell them a little bit about who you are, where you're working today, and a bit of your background before we dive into the conversation.
Yeah. Michael Muse. I'm a senior consultant at Guidehouse, working on the automation and innovation team. We specialize in revenue cycle, but we hit automation kind of all over the place and wherever the impact is driven. Have a background in as pre-med in college, always had an interest in kind of business applications and those sorts of things, and found consulting actually in my last year before accepting my med school. applications. So they transferred me over to the consulting way of things, and haven't looked back since.
That's great. We and so um, so often on the show we talk to PS leaders or people that have spent kind of their entire careers, long careers in consulting and in professional services. As a senior consultant, you're on the scale or in the continuum. You're relatively earlier in your career, and so I'm excited about this conversation and excited about diving into kind of your perspective and how you see things, in particular around a topic that's been obviously a hot topic for us and everybody that we're talking to is AI, right? And you entered consulting at a time where AI was maybe at the infancy, but you certainly like kind of learned a lot of how you do work and how you behave with AI being a tool and a capability that's in your tool belt. And so like talk a little bit about how that came about since you've been in your role, since you've been doing consulting. Take us through a little bit of like how you kind of experienced the evolution and the transition of AI being this thing that exists out there to something you likely use every day now.
Yeah, so when I first started, AI was not in the day-to-day workspace. It was one of those things you just heard stories in the wind about it and kind of knew it was coming. Um, and so, kind of even through my college career, had to do it the old-fashioned way, and sit down and study and write my papers and not be able to template it out myself. But I remember when even Copilot got introduced to Guidehouse, you would have thought Armageddon was happening. Everybody was jumping on calls and saying, "What's this new tool? How can we implement it into our projects? Get this in front of the clients, and where's the evolution of this going to take us?" And I think AI fundamentally changed the speed at which things can get done, which everyone talks about. But more importantly, it changed the ceiling in which people can handle responsibility of different tasks. And so, one thing that I constantly use it for is analysis and reporting and generating those outputs that clients are looking for. But um, something that would have taken me for one project, 1 to 2 days to get done and generate kind of a real thorough understanding of what that output was, and the drive there is I can now get handed 5 or 6 of these things for multiple different projects, and be able to handle it in the same amount of time. And so I think kind of that implementation of accelerated workflows and getting that output, especially the initial output and even understanding of certain subjects kind of through the door is huge. Um, that being said, I think the biggest shift wasn't the tools themselves. It was the learning how to design workflows around them. So um, in the initial days, people were trying to copy old processes and insert AI into it, and seeing that happen, it was just like, this is not the most effective way that we can do this. We need to create some sort of new framework where AI is now creating that basis and driving it from there, rather than just let's do the same exact thing every day and just insert AI into these certain pinpoints where we think it could help.
I appreciate that, right, and that explanation of kind of how you're using it, and I want to dive into the details of that here in just a second, but frame it a little bit for us. Where are you on the continuum of kind of your utilization of some of these AI tools and stuff like that across your team? Are you a super user, power user? You find yourself kind of in the middle? Do you wait for others to figure it out and find those use cases? Like where do you sit and how do you approach that maybe relative to some others on your team?
Yeah. I'd like to think of myself kind of closer to that power user. I like to sit on the experimental side, but also, making sure that I, fit within the framework of, the risk and compliance and things along those lines. But um, generally, I kind of like to push the boundaries with the AI and the prompt engineering. And then if I find something that works, I think a big part of, leadership roles nowadays is not just here's how I'm using AI to accelerate my work on a day to day, but being able to generalize it to the team. And so I constantly sending out templates of this is something that I used, a template that I generated with AI and the stuff inside of it. Here's the analysis that I used in the prompt that I used to generate this template and output and things along those lines, and being able to walk the team through it. And so not only does that, they understand that that's out there now, but they understand kind of the thought process behind creating those prompts, or, here was the problem with the client. Here's generally how I walked through it. And it got me to a good place, and was able to.
Michael, how does management, let's take for granted you're a super user. Is that noticed by the partners you work for? And is it just like, hey, it's expected, or we really appreciate it?
Yeah. I think it's noticed. I like to, put myself in, and our team is very much new in a lot of different aspects. And so, and that was one of the things that kind of gravitated me towards our team was I didn't necessarily like being in a, somewhere where they're doing the same thing for the past 20 years. Like I very much like to be on the experimental side. And so a good thing about our team is we are in very close communication with our partners and executive leadership, and are constantly being able to give them the insights that we're finding at the kind of granular level. And Mike Duke or Doug Long might have this idea of what could be, and then it's our job to be able to kind of chase what that looks like, and then we'll get feedback and be able to clean it up. But I think it's very much appreciated when we're able to say, hey, I think, back when Mike and Doug, they'll tell us stories about we would have this idea for a methodology. It would take us weeks to develop, a framework, and then we would get it totally torn down. For us now, we can create it in 3 days, get them some sort of draft in front of their face, and then they'll say, change this, that, or the other, or in many cases, burn it down and rebuild it. And be able to do that in kind of a quick turnaround. So it's not as much as a work, increase there, just to be able to kind of get those general ideas out the door.
Yeah, it's important to be able to do rework quickly as you learn what they want. And at full disclosure, we know Mike and Doug and dearly respect them. How do you find that they are also experimenting quickly with AI, or are they kind of taking super users like you input and then experimenting with it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think being on the automation team in the industry that we're in, they experiment with it quite a bit. And I can't tell you how many times Mike or Doug have come down and said, we're using this type of automation. We found this new, vendor that does this, or this, here's a prompt that does this. They're very much in the day to day. But I think a large part of that is because they are driving the client conversations at that executive leadership level, and clients expect them to be able to. A lot of them aren't necessarily in the day to day AI conversations, or that they've heard the general bubble automation, but haven't got into the specifics of it. And I think it's a huge part of their job when talking to them is being able to explain it in a way that's, we have this option, we have this option. We've actually looked into this type of automation for the specific problem that you're having. And it's something that, we might not have as a solution currently, but it's something that we can develop. And as we're working with you, 6 months down the road, it might be something that we've developed and ready to roll out.
Yeah, how have, if they have, expectations changed both from your leaders and or from clients, now that they know that the turnaround time and we can build something and then burn it down and start all over and build something better the next time, can happen in such short cycles? Have you seen changes both internally and externally around, like, hey, what's my role on this? What's my turnaround time on this? Just anything broadly about expectations.
Yeah. So of course, with AI, the expectation to be able to get outputs out the door is in a speedy manner is definitely there. But I think from an internal perspective, and it kind of flows into the client facing perspective, is with most things you have to have with most things you have to have discipline. And I think AI is a huge case of that, of not just allowing it to help you understand. It'll very quickly help you understand the big picture, but it'll also very quickly stop too early if you're not disciplined. And so I think internally the expectation is be intentional about the AI understanding that you're using, especially in your early years, when you're still trying to get kind of the consulting understanding or healthcare understanding under your belt. Asking the why question, or the deeper explanation of what you're actually generating, as well as the edge cases or the validation logic. Because Anthony, we talked last week about you can constantly be in an Excel before AI was there, and I could tell you what was in cell D6 and why that equation works the way that it does, because I spent hours on it. But now people are just generating it through AI and then getting in front of a client and not being able to back up the judgment there. And I think that's a huge part of why consultants are hired, is for that judgment and being that expert. And if you're just getting the AI topical case, then that it's that career limiter there.
We were sharing some stories on this topic. I was thinking very specifically about, right, like you, right, you find yourself in these projects, in these situations with a big project team, and you have people that are working on understanding of thousands and thousands of lines of data and information in a spreadsheet, and organizing it in different ways, and doing the analysis and the interpretation of that took a long time. But by doing that, you became intimately familiar with like all the details of it. And so a question might get asked in a client meeting that's actually not part of your presentation or report out, but because you spent so much time trying to understand the key takeaways from the data, you know the answers to those questions, and you could speak credibly about some of that stuff. That there is the risk of taking the shortcut and saying, well, AI produced the report and here's the outputs of it. And even if I trust the output and the results of it, and we tuck aside the risk of not being able to trust the outputs of that, right, and the hallucination risk that exists there, you still run the risk of not actually understanding the underlying data that goes into that kind of analysis. And we've all been in front of clients, and they're going to ask a question that's not on your script or your slide, and your ability to answer that in the moment and speak credibly about something like that adds a lot of value to the conversation, and therefore increases the value you provide. And so yeah, I mean, you mentioned a couple of these, but if there's anything else that you personally do to make sure, especially as you're still kind of learning, I mean, we're always learning things, but like as you're going through a fast learning curve in your career, how do you make sure that we're learning all the things we need to do and making the time to do that, while also trying to hit all these aggressive timelines and goals, because everybody expects us to be a lot more efficient now?
Yeah. So I think one of the most important things, and I personally have my document is called an automation repository, but it's the templates that you create, especially if you're going to want to be one of the front runners on your team with that automation. Is I can't tell you how many prompts I have in a Word document that I said that for this situation, this was the prompt that I used. And so you're not sitting there every day in AI, having to walk it through these specific situations, detail by detail. I've found that after I find a prompt that gets me the output that I want, you're actually able to reverse prompt engineer, many things in business cases where you find something that works and you want to understand how it worked. You are able to go back through it and figure out what components actually made it, click. But you can ask the prompt, whether you're using Copilot or ChatGPT, create a prompt for me that would get me this exact result every time. And I'll copy that into a Word document and put the situation that I used it in. And then have that there, as well as, the templates for what created a specific PowerPoint that I liked, an Excel equation or some sort of analysis. I think being able to create a repeatable repository there, and then also making sure that you share that with your team, so that they understand that it's there, and kind of coach them how you got it is huge.
How do you think this affects the way we bring people onto the organization?
Yeah, so Dean, I think in the last podcast that you had, you kind of compared it to a Christmas tree, and the log of the Christmas tree being that ultimately bottom level. And I thought about it for a while, and I think that adding another layer to it, which is the curtain underneath the tree that catches all of the fallings from the tree, is kind of something that we've seen where, we're bringing in all these new hires out of college, kids that have, grown up with AI at their fingertips as kind of a best buddy. But they don't necessarily come with, um, it's not a replacement for hard work, and it's not a replacement for curiosity. And I think what we find is we hire a lot of those like C1s or interns, and they're coming in, and they're you can almost tell immediately who's just getting those topical answers from the outputs, and then just kind of coasting at that level. But then the ones that are able to, with the conversation that I have with Anthony, uh, be able to generate those conversations where if I ask you something off the script and you never understood the why behind the AI prompt that you put in the generation, then we're not going to be able to create that connection, and you're not going to be able to create that connection with a client. And so you're kind of see that fall off, of those first generation consultants that are coming in, where you can tell that the curiosity and the hard work needs to still go into that understanding.
It almost just gives those who really get it more reach, which in a way I think puts a little more pressure on the junior people to differentiate early. Matter of fact, we have a friend that just wrote a book called Differentiate Early. But I think that's very true. I think that's very true.
Yeah, you talked about the connection with the client aspect of it, and to your point, I think the value of consultants and a professional services team isn't having all the answers to this, right? That's why when we're talking about, right, the commoditization of knowledge work and of consultants and stuff like that, I kind of roll my eyes a little bit in that, because like if it was just as easy as having the answers available, then people would go and buy expertise and just get access to it, and everyone would implement everything successfully, and they'd move forward, and there would be no issues. Where but we all know that 80% of strategic initiatives or transformations or large implementations have an issue, or they fail, or they stall, or something like that happens. And the difference there is that connection with the client, which is, okay, what do they actually need? What do they actually need to understand in order to do this? And then how do I tailor the data, the message, the information, that whatever it is, to help guide them through that? And you can call it change management, you can call it whatever you want, but like guiding them through to the outcome is really the secret sauce in all of this stuff. And the faster you can get access to data and the better you are at doing the things you're talking about, to Dean's point, just frees up your ability to actually make that impact and actually drive the clients to an outcome. And so from that perspective, I mean, it does become a real superpower there, rather than a risk to our business, our profession, what have you.
Yeah, SMEs just provide information, but they don't change anything. Consultants' job is to get an outcome.
Yeah, yeah. And there's going to be organizations that were just providing expertise and not getting outcomes, and they're not going to be around as long. But the people that are there actually focusing on driving outcomes and moving that kind of stuff forward is that's going to be important. So how do you, on that topic, right? How do you make sure you're developing and refining that skill? Are there things that you're doing, that your organization's doing, to make sure that client connection is something that is stressed and important to you all, and everybody's moving along that journey?
Yeah. So and our team's a little bit different, where Mike and them like to call it old school, but it's we're very much in person, and so most of our clients that we sign, unless they're shoving us out the door and saying stay home, then most of the time we're going to be in on site kind of face to face interactions and creating that connection. And I think that's one of the biggest drivers on our team. And what I've seen, because one of the firms that I've worked for before was very much, and it was COVID era, so stay home, everybody just connect through Teams meetings. There was kind of that disconnect with the clients, and we're going to come in this meeting, have a very topical conversation. Here's the results that we got here. Can we drive some sort of change here? But when you're in person and able to kind of have those conversations that are pop your head in their office, we're not having a meeting like, here, this is what I'm seeing. Do you have any other thoughts or kind of concerns with the way that I'm approaching this? And then being able to say that ultimately we're trying to get to this point where we're able to validate this piece of judgment that we're getting hired to come in and provide. But being able to work with them on that day to day, especially kind of the managers and the supervisors, and show them like, hey, this is how we worked through it, allows them to generate that trust in that judgment whenever that is applied, and that change management is kind of implemented on the client itself.
Yeah, Michael, you would looking at me, you'd understand I like old school. Yeah. I like that very
it
much.
works.
Hey, where do you think it's going? Do you have any view of where AI is going to take us?
I think the workflows are going to continue to, be refined. The speed in which that AI is going to increase, where the analysis, 2 years ago might have taken us 3 days to complete. Now it's taking us a day. Ultimately, everyone's going to have an AI repository of a prompt that works. It's going to take us a few hours, and then you'll have some sort of AI that can justify that output. And kind of continue. I think the base level consultants it's again, the curiosity and kind of judgment is still going to be the huge differentiators early on, and then ultimately the managers are, from what I've seen, kind of changing into project managers to a certain aspect, where it's, I'm no longer on this one client focusing on making those deliverables perfect, because AI can get it to a pretty close range, and I'll spend 30 minutes just checking through the data and making sure everything looks good. So now I can manage 6 different projects with those entry level consultants that are using those AI prompts to come in. So I think that kind of middle ground is, and I've read a few articles where even the executive staff might just start coming from that project management background, just because they understand how AI can kind of circulate over the entire firm or practice, and be able to kind of handle, at first I was looking at 3 major subject lines. Now I can look over, congregate that into these certain buckets and understand how AI is affecting everything. But I definitely see everyone's workload not necessarily increasing as far as the amount of work that you're doing, but spreading that out, the butter pat effect, where it's
it's a very technical term there, Michael. The butter pat. I've read that in my grad school. Hey, for everybody your age, leave us with a couple of, hey, I wish everybody thought this, right? Just a couple of key things that says, hey, if I was your boss, these are the couple of things I'd want you to know.
Yeah. So I think AI is a tool. It's not a replacement for thinking. Speed matters, but understanding is more important, especially in the longevity of your career and the results that I've seen. Career growth comes from judgment, not necessarily the output. So being able to speak to those fully is going to increase that growth exponentially. But I think the consultants who will lead in the next phase are the ones who balance the technology adoption with the curiosity, accountability, and then also to elevate the teams around them. It's hard to be silent in a corner and kind of allow people to understand your process expertise in an area. So being able to generate the team around you as well is a huge advantage to show that leadership ability.
Well, Michael, we've loved having you, and we obviously are very excited, not just what's going on there, but what's going on in the firms and what's going on for people during your stage. We'll love to have you back after you've lost a little hair.
Yeah,
not just a little,
it's
maybe
coming.
8.
Don't wish that on
Yeah,
him.
yeah. But hey, thank you so much, and we look forward to having you back.
Yeah, appreciate it, Dean. Thank you, Anthony.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. Well, if you enjoyed that conversation with Michael and want to hear more like it, you can subscribe, follow us on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and you can always get the latest episodes pushed to you. We'll do a bit of a plug here. We have a bunch of great guests coming up that we've recorded over the past couple of weeks here that are staged to come out, covering a wide range of topics. But we have received a lot of requests lately of topics that we've touched on every once in a while, but the audience wants some different perspectives on that. And I encourage everybody to check out our Consultants Way LinkedIn page to see what some of those topics are. If you are a guest or if you know somebody that's an expert on one of those topics, would love to hear from you, because that's something the audience is looking for. We'll be on the lookout for people like that too. If you want to get in contact with us, you can use that LinkedIn Consultants Way page to do that, or you can find Dean or myself on our individual pages. Or you can always email the show at podcast@consultantsway.com. So looking forward to hearing from everybody. Thanks. We'll see you next time.